I'm going to go over one document as a way of just helping people understand what space the sassafras flow engine occupies, because it's really not identical to GlobiFlow, but it's similar. So this is my best current version of documenting the concept, but everyone's familiar with the Podio side of the document of this diagram. And what happens inside of Podio. So this Podio is where the starting point of all of this is for me. And Podio, in this diagram, we're not talking about solution management, which John covered. We're just talking about what happens in the event cycle when someone's using it. When someone uses your application, how do you process those events? So as you know, a webhook presents a URL, which is the Podio event target URL in this diagram. And I'll show you the structure of the URL. It's a regular structure. You will know your solution ID. You will not know your hash in advance. It's a unique hash that gives you some features that we could talk about later, but normal webhooks. So inside of Sassafras now, once we have it routed over that URL, we're going to look up that hash value. And if it's found, we're going to process it as an event. Now, there's a unique cycle if you're adding new webhooks. And so if it's a new webhook verification, we go over to verify new webhook and we're done. And that cycle is over. But if it's not a new webhook and we're talking about actual activity of a Podio user, then we put it in queue an event from Podio. And so we have a queuing system that there's always a trade-off with queuing. If you're at all familiar with computer science, the trade-off is that you can process a lot more, but you might get delays. And that's Podio for you, right? You can do a whole bunch with it, but you might have some delays in your calculations. And it's because they're worried about scaling and those controls more than they are worried about the speed of any individual single event. And we kind of find the same trade-off because we're working with Podio. So after that event is queued, we go into what's called solution routing. Solution routing is where it actually becomes fully your event as a developer of a Sassafras flow. And so the solution routing, what it does, to give you an idea, is it keeps all the same Podio event data that you might be accustomed to, well documented on Podio's developer page. You know, if you have an item created event, then it tells you the item ID. If you have an item update event, you also get the item ID, but you also get a revision ID. And so that event data is all in the event, but the solution routing adds additional data. And the data it adds is the ID of your solution, the version of the solution that this event came from in the deployed environment. So if you just did a patch overnight to someone's solution, then this event will carry a new solution version. And you can write logic that depends on that. So you can treat different versions of a program differently when you receive that event. You can say, oh, this is version 0. That means they don't have these features. So my program's not going to do this. Well, if it's version 1, you can say, oh, they do have these features. That means I'm going to go down this branch of the logic and do these things. So that's the idea of including solution version to match the patching capability of Sassafras. The second part that solution routing adds, which is critical, is the client information. Who did you deploy the solution to? Was it Bob, who is, you know, on your sales team, or was it a client who has, you know, branches, you know, around the country? And those kind of structures are dependent upon what we call the client environment relationship. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds at this point, but suffice it to say that we enhance the event data to give you the context of where in Sassafras this event occurred from the standpoint of whose copy is this. Then you're in the Sassafras function container. And this is what I'm really going to delve into more right now, is the Sassafras function container. This is our little environment where you can process that event with your code, and you can call out to other systems. There's a lot of limitations on what you can do, but there's a lot of advantages too. And I'm really interested to hear in what people would want to do with it beyond what it can already do. So I'm going to go over to some Visual Studio now. I want to mention one thing in relation to what Gil spoke up about, which is that today, this is all written in C# on the back end, and I'm a C# developer, not strictly. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but this is currently C#. But if someone has a preference for another coding language, then because of this design where the sassafras function container, all it does is receive an event that's been enhanced, this sassafras function container can run in any language. So if you have a bunch of JavaScript developers, or you have a bunch of Python developers, or you have a bunch of whatever other developers, and you say, well, I like your stuff, but we just don't like C#. We can work with you. We just have to re-implement the sassafras function container in another language, and everything else looks the same. So we can talk about that if anyone has an interest in that. But this is the C# version. And I want to just lay out the structure and let you see how it fits in with everything else we've shown. Before I do that, I'm going to mention one more thing, which is this. And this is the biggest difference between GlobyFlow and the Sassafras Flow Engine. The difference is that when Sassafras routes an event from any one of the deployed copies of your solution, literally any one of them, then the processing engine on the background can actually run that event on identical code to everyone else. Literally the exact same identical code from the standpoint of how bits are encoded into binary. Now, it's not necessarily the same copy of that code, because Amazon Web Services has a fantastic service that lets us make a bunch of copies very, very quickly, but it's the same code. And so as you update that code, you provide that update to everyone who is running your software. GlobyFlow, we love. We use GlobyFlow extensively, and it doesn't do that. And it allows you to prototype very quickly a single space. It allows you to prototype faster than we can. But once you get to that window where prototyping is not your critical, main driver, and what you want to do is make sure that everyone's using the same version of the software that you've already prototyped, then we can satisfy that requirement because everyone runs the same version. You don't have to copy. You don't have to worry about, well, what GlobyFlow are they actually running if you're managing multiple ones, which can become quite cumbersome. So I just wanted to mention that. And I'll also stop for a moment because I have a tendency to rush through things and ask if there are any questions I can answer before I continue. I don't see windows or anything, so maybe I'm not looking in the right place. If no one stops me, I guess I'll just continue. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is a C# solution, and on the left side there's one project called Sassafras Podio Function. Sassafras Podio Function is a template around which you can build additional functions if you like C#. This would be something we would develop a template version of for other languages as well. But that's what the Sassafras Podio Function project represents, is just the basic way that you need to have a C# program structured to where it could run on the Sassafras Flow Engine. I'm sorry, I got those mixed up. That's actually the, no, that's right. I'm sorry. What I just said is correct. So now what I'm going to show you is a project that, if you look in the dependencies in C#, we have this system called NuGet that lets you import a project. And so if the Podio function is the template, then you have to import it, and you import it through a NuGet reference. So it's just available out there in the wild, and we'll even open source it and let people see how it works and verify the security and help us improve it, hopefully. But you just stick a NuGet reference out there and you can start building your function. So there are 4 pieces in here, and 3 of them you're going to see in any function that uses the Sassafras Podio function as a template. These first 3. The very last one is just special to this solution in terms of how I structured it, to show you a little bit more about the concept of what can be accomplished with the Sassafras Flow Engine that is kind of provides ideas of how we can grow this ecosystem if people choose to use it. But away from that, these first 3 are critical to understanding how this project works. I'm going to start with the startup. This is going to get a little bit into the weeds for developers, non-developers, but it's I just want to provide the information anyway. When you have a startup class in Sassafras, what you're doing is you're initializing your container with anything that it needs to run and get the function done correctly. And so startup is kind of before the event is processed at all. In fact, it literally is. I don't have, unfortunately, a good sequence diagram to share that shows you the order of events, but I'll develop that. But the startup phase happens before the event is processed in the event container. So the event has been triggered. Oh, there's an event. And so what happens in Amazon is it spins up a little machine, which is their function as a service offering called Lambda. So it spins up a little machine as soon as that event comes in, and it fires up this startup process as a part of how it initializes the container. This is where you put security. This is where we bake in security, so you can't skip it. This is where you also bring in any special variables. Like if you have an API key that you need to call an additional service, this is where you load it into the container. This is also where you can do things fancier than that. For instance, well, I don't want to get into it because this isn't the right environment. But ask me if you're curious. There's a lot of things we could do that I probably haven't thought of. The second piece is this, this function. And the function class is actually poorly named, but I'm just not going to rename it right now. But the function class is the piece that actually represents the model for the data that your container is going to process. And so in C#, I can follow down these chains to show you a definition of this class of the Sassafras solution command. And what you'll see in this class is that it has the solution ID and the version that I mentioned. And so these are the data elements that are available to you as that event comes through in this object, which is a generic object that gets reused, called the Sassafras solution command. Every single event that comes through is based upon this structure. The Sassafras client filter has the client level data, which again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I just wanted to show that little piece. And so what this class does is it represents the interface into your actual program logic. So we have the startup initiation, and we have the interface piece that routes the structure of your data to your program logic. And as you can guess, the last piece is your program logic. And so this one is a class that implements an interface called the iEvent handler. The iEvent handler, for, again, just a little bit into the weeds, has a very simple signature. It's going to call initiation, and it's going to call the function a handle function. So if you implement that, then you have something that can act as a handler for these events. I'm not going to dig into initiation because there's already been a lot of init calls made. And I'm also not going to dig into the specific logic of this function. I'll just describe it. In fact, this init function is empty, as you can see. So there was no need to do any additional initialization once we're inside the function window. But I'm going to mention what the logic is behind this additional init, because why have two? Here's the logic. The first init is something that if you use our template function, you get the guarantees of how we verify certain aspects of security. And so you should use it, but you don't have to. You can make your application less secure under certain requirements if you chose to, but then you're on your own. You don't have the guarantee of our container. And so inside this initialization, we bake in our own security, and it also provides a point for you as the solution owner and developer to provide a minimum level of initialization. What happens once you're inside your logic is that you can actually provide an opportunity for client level initialization to occur that is separated by that security window from the solution level logic. As an example, if the client wants to integrate with an additional system, but for whatever reasons, it has to be even more secure to where they can't even let you have access to it, this initialization function would let them have a process to load encryption keys that you don't have access to. So it's another process point for your clients to actually have additional control over how this container manages their data. We don't use it yet, but I saw the need, so I just went ahead and wrote it in. Now we're talking about the meat of it, which is the handle implementation in the event handler. I'm going to pause again because this is another stepping off point to see if there are any other questions. I know I'm throwing a lot at people, but maybe someone has an additional question.
Alex, I actually want to got a few things that I want to point out that you said, and particularly around the security. We deal with financial and medical and government clients here at BrickBridge, so security has been top priority for us. And Alex, I know your career is steeped in both medical and financial, so security is always top of mind. Maybe talk a little bit about the security that our templates afford.
Okay.
And then you got about 10 minutes.
Sure. So the model for the security that I implemented in the sassafras function container, I'll go back to this picture just to show where it occurs in the architecture. If you want to enter this container with any event data, it doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't matter if it came from Podio. It doesn't matter if it came from sassafras inside this system. Nothing matters. Once you get to this code window where your code runs, there's an additional security check that happens every single time. We never trust anyone inside this container, ever. You have to bring the goods to show us that you are trusted. And the way we do that is using a modern shared token security system based on JWT, which is the JSON Web Token. So the idea is behind the JSON Web Token, just very briefly, is that it uses a cryptography scheme to encode data in a token, and the data that's in the token can be publicly verified if you structure it correctly. And so the logic inside the function container, when it receives an event, there's another layer to this, which I haven't documented here, which is the security layer, which provides the authorization that Sassafras has to route an event to your code. So when an event comes through Podio and we've verified that this is a good event, then we sign this event with a JWT and say, we're going to send this to you from Sassafras. When this comes into your code container, you look at that signature and you say, I don't trust it. I'm going to verify it. And so you have the public key cryptography information that's required to verify the signature on the event. And the event signature is guaranteed up to a certain window that I won't want to get into, that is closed. So it's a short-lived permission that you receive. if this function fails and then it tries to run again later, you have to design the token to say, yes, it can try to run again with this within this window. If it tries to run again beyond that window, the token is no longer valid and it stops running. So that's actually baked into the, there's data in the token that says, don't trust this before this time and don't trust it after this time. And the container can verify all of that. And it can make its own security choices in terms of which elements it wants to verify. And so any client of yours, any solution developer can raise the level of security if they want to. There's a floor below which I do not suggest lowering the security, and we provide that level for you. But it's very easy to raise the level of security if you had a need, because we have that zero trust environment. So I hope that answers the questions you might have been thinking about, Gil. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, it does. I appreciate you pointing that out. You know, that allows people to think about how they can use this tool set.
Yeah, and it enables one more thing that you're getting me thinking about, Gil, and I don't want to drone on about this before I can kind of talk a little bit about the actual meat of the code. But this container can receive events from other flow engines. It doesn't have to come from Sassafras. As long as the container can verify the event, this event could be sent directly from GlobyFlow to Sassafras. And GlobyFlow could sign the JWT, and Sassafras could verify it and say, okay, thanks GlobyFlow, I'll take it from here. And when GlobyFlow is done, or when Sassafras is done, it could send the event back to GlobyFlow. Now, I don't know why you would want to do that, but people want to do a lot of things that I don't expect. And so we can do that if we need to.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Just because we're going to run thin on time, I want you to get to what you got, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
Great. So this is the area where this becomes just writing code. And there are a few features that are special about it that I want to point out. And once we get beyond those features, it's just writing code. It happens to be in C#. So the special things are that you get a dictionary service primarily. The dictionary service is this implementation right here. If you look at it, it just has a few methods: get key, put key, and get dictionary. And what is a dictionary? A dictionary in C#, we have this generic object type called the dictionary. And it can be anything you want, of where you map one object type to another. It's like a hash table, but better actually. But anyway, this dictionary is a string dictionary. And that means that you can look up values that have been provided to you in this Sassafras flow engine. This gets injected into the container by the startup process. So if I dug into the startup process and showed you how it actually runs, one of the things it does is it says, your event came from this solution and this client, and they have a special context in their environment where they run code. And that context is different than Bob. It's different than the people in New York, and it's different than someone running version 2 potentially. But all that context is important to how I run my code, and I need it available here. So the startup injects this dictionary. It looks it up from Sassafras. It goes and finds all your dictionary data just for that environment, not for other clients, not for other solutions, just what you need. It looks up that dictionary, and it injects it into the environment under this interface, so you have access to it. Now in code, when you run and you want to do something, the first thing you're likely to do is go get the dictionary, because you're going to need it a lot. And then, for instance, if you want to create something in another app, like you want to say, when this event happens, someone sold something. So I want to, post a congratulatory message, or I want to post a follow-up with a client, or I want to do this. But your code doesn't know who did it until you have this dictionary. Your code doesn't know which copy of your program is running until it looks at this dictionary. This dictionary and the solution ID and all the other data tells it everything it needs to know to make this code run in response to that environment. And that means if you create a new item in a related application, when you look up that application in Podio, you want the correct version. You want the one with the correct application ID. That application ID is in the dictionary. And the way that we provide that to you is by having a key structure for all of the names of the dictionary. And so in this case, we're going to look up something called the app ID. And the key structure is right here in a little test space that I made that tells you what I want to look up. Well, there's a little pipe character that divides the elements of this key. So on the first part is always the name of the workspace, or at least the name of the workspace when you captured the solution. The second element is always going to be the application inside that workspace. At least the name of that application when you captured the solution. So if you provided this name to the dictionary, you're going to get the application ID that this person has in their copy of the solution. It's their duplicate license resolver application. It's their BBC playground test space in whatever organization they're using. If you have multiple deployments in a single organization and you want to rename every one of those workspaces that are duplicates for different people because you don't want them to get confused, you can go rename them. This name is only what it was named when you captured it. It's not what you changed the name to. So if you have to go change the name, feel free. We're going to rely on this name to key it out in the future, though, so your developers have to know what it was originally called. So choose wisely. And everything else is available too. You get down to the field level, you can build new items, you can insert them anywhere in Podio, you can build new relationships, you can do everything en masse, and you can do it in a program that can run for up to 15 minutes. So the current limitation, John can jump in and correct me if I'm getting anything on the AWS Lambda stats incorrect, but I think we can actually, ours don't, by default, we do not run for 15 minutes, but if you have a need for running an extended program that will just take longer, a dedicated machine will be spun up to run your code for 15 minutes, should it take that long. This code can take that long that I'm showing you right now because it does something special, which I don't have time to get into it elaborately, but the basic idea is that this code dynamically builds tables that require interaction from a Podio user. So if you have changes in one application and you want to, or if you have changes in multiple applications and you want to show a linkage between all of those different applications in a single field in a table, Podio doesn't provide tables natively, but if you want to provide a big text block in an HTML table that provides data from all of those items, this little function helps you build that. And so that's what the table builder code is. It's just a little CSharp class that I could lift out and put on GitHub and let anyone use, as long as they are using a Sassafras function container. So this is a reusable code piece that helps people build tables in Podio dependent upon what their Sassafras function container is doing. So that's about, I think, the end of my time.
Alex, Seth just informed us he's having a little technical troubles. So we're actually going to start Seth's presentation at 10 after 10 Eastern time.
Okay.
So you got about 5 more minutes. We're going to award you over. Then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll start our keynote.
Who I have 5 more minutes?
That is correct. Yeah. So if you want to touch on one more topic, we don't have any too much to go into the Q&A. So if you want to show some other things, that'd be good.
Oh, okay. No questions. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, you can see that here's where I hacked together a little table logic in the HTML to build out a table that other code could reuse and implement the same design. here's another little example of something I built on this model as just an example code piece, is a file import handler. And this one lets you kind of reuse code that pulls a file in, processes it, and does something with it. In this case, what it does with it is it compares items in this document, which could be quite large, to duplicates that could be spread across many different applications. Since you have a item limit inside of a Podio application, if you want to do the task of duplicate resolution across more items than you can fit in a single application, you have to build more applications. And this code lets you store the same kind of data in multiple applications, but then have one process that filters across all copies, kind of like a hash table. Anyway, I can tell you more about that if you're interested in it, but it kind of expands the filter capacity of Podio applications. Okay.
Alex, I'd like to use just the last few minutes talking over how this Flow Engine tool is available, kind of what stage that it's at, how people can, if they're interested in this, how they can interact with it. So I'll start with we have actually some third-party developers that are writing, correct, today?
Yeah, we do, and we would like more because it needs improvement, and we know that. And we've been eating our own dog food, and we've been in kind of in stealth mode for years, which is not normally a good sign. So we're coming out of stealth mode now, and we'll see how it goes. But we've been actually using this tool, so it's been useful for our consulting business, and we want feedback. And so our objective is to open source a lot of the core pieces and really focus on delivering it as a service and making it useful for Podio developers. And so we do have one developer who's really been helpful, and he's been patient, working with me and helping us advance the product. And I think he likes it. He's still with us. And we have some other people who I know want to work with us, and I'm eager to work with all of them. So as much as possible, we will listen and try to design and build the product to meet what you want it to do, now that the architecture is stable enough to really start feature iteration.
Excellent. So people can just reach out to us directly, sassfrest.com or service@brickbridgeconsulting.com if you're interested. So ultimately, people can code themselves. BrickBridge also does this, or a hybrid thereof. A lot of people we've kind of started their code base, and then allowed them to take that either internal with their own development team, take it offshore development team. So it's very approachable. You don't have to use us to get access to this product. You can get on there. And currently code in your own C#.
Yeah, and I want to mention one last thing, which is that the interactions that we've had with developers so far have been hugely beneficial. And so it's just a matter that we're a small team. If we were a big team, we'd be interacting effectively with even more developers. But hopefully we get a little seed to grow it, and we can get other developers working on this, wherever they are. But the one interaction that we've had, just to give you an idea of how it's spread the product out into a new direction, we implemented a feature that lets someone have two solutions that you capture independently. You have a central solution, and then he calls it hub and spoke. It's his concept. So he has a hub solution and a spoke solution. And you might have a client who comes along who's brand new, doesn't use any of your software. You give them a hub and a spoke. Well, they are actually an agency that has multiple people working. So when they hire a new person, they don't want another hub. They want a new spoke. And so you deploy a new spoke. And it's totally separate from other hubs and spokes. And so the question is, when you deploy a spoke, the logic he wrote needs the hub. It needs the same hub as the first spoke. How do you do that? Well, we couldn't do it at first, and now we can, or at least we're getting better at it if we're not there. And so he's now able to deploy his spoke, and it will wire itself up automatically to the hub. And then it has all the logic it needs to act like to the first one deployed. And if you update and version them, it's a little trickier because there's dependencies you have to manage. But again, if anyone's interested in it, come talk to us, and we'd like to hear your ideas. Thank you.